And now that we talked about decision support systems, executive support systems, and then before that we talked about types of decisions they have to support, we'll move on into systems that support group decision making and coordination in terms of sharing information. So we'll talk about group support systems, then we'll move on to geographic information systems, and then we'll finish up with the guidelines in general for designing these systems that we just covered, and they tend to be called management support systems. So group support systems. Sometimes you will have to work in an environment, and probably not as often as other tasks, but that require decision makers to work in a group. And so here I'm not just saying that you have a team that works on a 6-month project and you send somebody some information and 2 days later they reply back and that's how you form this decision. I'm talking about using computer and communication technologies to deal in a setting that requires a lot of group interactions, that can have confusion, barriers, where a lot of people are at the same place. They are responsible for a certain number of inputs that go into decisions, and other group of people for another set of those inputs, and it can be chaos if you don't have some kind of a system that supports that decision making. So you're looking at a system that helps us reduce the barriers in communications and create some order and efficiency in this whole situation that can be pretty chaotic. So these systems, the way you implement them obviously will lead to the success of that, but the way you will go about implementing it successfully is making sure that there is a match between what the users and group can and should do, so their sophistication and the scope of the task, and can that group support system actually support that. So there are a number of examples where you can run these systems. If you have some kind of a committee that requires input from multiple stakeholders, review panels, board meetings, and task forces, and for example in military, if you have to make a decision that's going to impact the situation on the field in real time, maybe even launch of something like a space shuttle, or if you need some decision making in a crisis situation, maybe in the forest fires or emergencies. Those are all scenarios in which, if you do not have a system that matches the sophistication of the users that are needed to make decisions, their inputs, the breakdown of the barriers that might exist there, they're critical to the success of those decision-making bodies and the groups. Part of these group support systems, you often hear a word groupware. So again, it's for teamwork, and it supports decision making, but primarily it's through providing of the access to some kind of environment that, if shared information can be stored, moved around, and accessed. So primarily, again, the difference there is providing access, and then there's a lot of decision making that later on happens, as in contrast to some on the previous slide what we were talking about. So that if you have a team in various locations, they can share the files and access the same information, same single version of the truth. There is a version control and things like that, and you will see a number of those environments and portals being created in your professional career as well. So some of the capabilities, conferencing capabilities, scheduling of appointments and meetings. Some of them have brainstorming capabilities for idea generation, accessing to certain data sets in databases. They tend to have ability to communicate through email, online chat, to-do lists, workflow automations, and things like that. So you probably use some of these groupware systems in your school as well as you work with your teams, even in your personal life when you need to create some kind of to-do list and workflow automation as well. There is also a family of products that the book is talking about. We call those electronic meeting systems. Their focus is enabling participation across different locations whenever you need people to be part of that group decision-making process. So there's a great reduction in cost now associated with this electronic meeting ways. You can have real-time computer conferencing. You can have just focused on a video conferencing. You can use your desktop to do the meetings and conferencing. Things like Zoom, Skype, and technologies like that are making this very affordable. A large number of people can participate. You can record some of these sessions. I guess in the past, that was kind of treated as a very special group of systems. Again, a lot of these features are getting integrated into another set of tools. That electronic meeting system, it becomes such a ubiquitous thing that we don't really spend much time talking about it. But I can tell you, in the past, maybe 10, 15 years ago, companies used to spend decent amount of money on setting up these special environments, right, where they would have the cameras and like a very expensive, highly customized equipment. I think there was overinvestment in a lot of parts, highly specialized, that get obsolete very fast and very hard to operate. Luckily, we live in a world where you just crank up your laptop, the camera comes on it, you send an invite, and you're up and running in a matter of minutes. But it was painful when I was a consultant setting up some of these conferences and client meetings and things like that. There's always something that didn't work, right? So you had to double, triple check everything and always have plan B and C when it came to these meeting systems. So we made a lot of great progress in these technologies. So you can always talk about pros and cons. One benefit is that we can do a lot of these meetings and we can see each other's face and do it at the same time without actually traveling. So when I used to work in a bank before, we would have a support team that sometimes worked out of India and that supported our projects. So we don't have to necessarily travel to India, or even within the US, if you work for a large company, maybe Fortune 500 company that has a lot of offices, you don't have to travel as much, and you can certainly collaborate more. It's much easier to just go and ask the expert or somebody who needs to put their input, and you can just have that meeting. So this leads to obviously doing more with less. So one way, that's less cost, and because you can do more stuff with a higher quality, somebody would say less stress given overall quality of decision and the time you put in there. Obviously, you can debate this one as you move into disadvantages, that there is this lack of human touch. Sometimes we require that human touch, especially if it's highly unstructured decision, but it's very hard to come to the common conclusion where you need to. There is something about the human touch and the relationships. And again, that can breed stress. That's why I was saying you can have multiple perspectives on the previous slide. You could end up with unnecessary meetings just because it's when something is easy, there is a very low cost to those meetings. So you just knee-jerk reaction might be another meeting, and so you're transferring the cost from technology cost and travel cost. You're transferring the cost onto something else through time that you're taking up from somebody. You don't necessarily need to meet every day, sometimes. And every time you use technology that moves things, maybe through the cloud, obviously you're using World Wide Web and Internet, there might be some security problems. You're sharing files. Are those files encrypted? How safe is that connection? Are you talking about some patents and very highly sensitive information for your company? So those are some of the things you need to think about. When you have to face-to-face, it might be less of a problem. And depending on how serious you are in setting up some of those environments, costs can still be high. especially if you have those big decision-making systems for the groups. So I'm not talking here just about the electronic meetings with different locations, but I'm talking about setting up those environments for the group decision making. They can be high and highly specialized software and hardware